Well, since this review is so long, I decided to use AI to write this introduction since I'm too lazy to come up with anything snappy or quippy. So, here was the result. Gareth Edwards, the creator, is like a puzzle missing a few pieces. It aspires to greatness, but you might find yourself looking for a little more magic in the cinematic creation. Maybe a little bit too ostentatious for my taste, but it gets the job done. Also, it was done by ChatGPT. Just thought I'd give them the proper credit. You know, just in case. Can't hurt to get on their good side, I always say. Alright, before we get started, as always, a quick thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. If you enjoy the content I make and would like to offer your support, then for as little as $1 a month, you can get your name listed right here at the start of every video. Link to that is in the description below. And now, let's get into the actual review.
We're the same. We can't go to heaven because you're not good. And I'm not a person.
The Creator takes place in a world where humans and AI are at war. Joshua Taylor, played by John David Washington, is sent in on a secret undercover mission that winds up going horribly wrong, and years later is asked to participate in one final mission, where failure could mean the end of humanity: find and destroy a weapon. However, the plan changes when it turns out said weapon is a little AI girl who has the power to control technology. This movie might actually be the single most frustrating viewing experience I have had all year. On one hand, this film has some of the best world building I have ever seen in a standalone sci-fi movie. On the other hand, the story is just so bland and forgettable, settling for what's essentially Diet Logan. On one hand, the film's visuals are genuinely stunning. It's visually distinct, many shots look like genuine works of art, and it managed to do it on a budget of only $80 million, which is nothing to sneer at. But on the other hand, the main character is such a boring, one-dimensional character that I honestly couldn't even remember what his name was while I was sitting there watching the credits roll. On one hand, the film kinda has some interesting themes and ideas that it very clearly wants to explore. But on the other hand, they really only scratch the surface with it, due in part to just not having enough time. Now, Gareth Edwards is a director that I know can be talented. He can even be genuinely fantastic. All you need to do is watch the climax of Rogue One for evidence of that. And I keep hoping for the day that he genuinely puts out that one film that finally is worthy of his talents. But I don't think that he's been given the best scripts for his movies. And this film is perhaps where the disconnect is the most obvious. Now, I will give him and this film credit. You can tell this is a film that he was passionate about, and that passion does shine through in some ways. This is a sci-fi film put out by a major studio that's not based on any kind of pre-existing property. In fact, Edwards actually helped co-write the screenplay, and they do an incredible work at setting up how exactly this world operates. From the first 10 minutes, you get it. You understand what the condition of this world is, how it got to this point, and it does it without feeling like it was front-loading the viewer or feeling like it was force-feeding you exposition. It is genuinely masterful filmmaking. The world that we're witnessing genuinely feels like it's lived in. And like I said, the visuals in this film are fantastic. The design of the AI is actually really simple and yet distinct. The action scenes are very well shot and staged impeccably, and it managed to do all this with a budget of only $80 million. I have long been begging for studios to take more chances on original projects and release more mid-budget movies, and this film is a product of that mindset. So I was really hoping this would come out great, and I was genuinely rooting for it. But unfortunately, it botches the one element that a film really can't recover from, and that's a bad script. It is by far the biggest problem with this film by a landslide. Like I said before, the actual plot of this film is basically just Logan, only with the focus being on the dangers of AI. And speaking of AI, I do find it quite amusing that this entire film, being based around this concept that humans shouldn't be scared of AI, was released right in the midst of the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes, where the actors and writers were, in part, worried about AI taking their jobs. The irony here is genuinely hilarious. In all seriousness, in terms of the writing and themes, I was actually curious as to what they were going to do with this theme. I mean, are they going to go the I Am Legend route, where it turns out that the AI beings are essentially the next step in human evolution? Are they going to go the route that this war wound up turning the AI beings into monsters not too dissimilar to the humans that they were fighting, working against their peaceful programming, and thereby illustrating that they've achieved a level of consciousness that goes beyond their programming? Or are they going to go the route of determinism, that humans essentially lack free will, and are therefore in a sense programmed themselves, and thereby have more in common with AI than they'd like to admit? The answer is, of course, robots good, man bad. It is quite literally the most stock and boring way that they could have handled it. I mean, there's literally no other interpretation that you can take away from it when you include scenes of the human army threatening to shoot a puppy, or invoking Holocaust-style imagery in how they dispatch of the AI. Now, there are some things they do with the AI that I actually found kind of interesting. It's that the robots have essentially created their own religions, and some of them are different depending on where they are in the world. And there's a lot of possibilities and potential here, but again, they don't really dive into it that much. And this is what I meant when I said this movie frustrates me. There's a really interesting world in here that can be explored, and there's areas to explore, and they've laid the groundwork for this world to be explored. But every time the world starts to get interesting, it just jerks you back into this boring Avatar meets E.T. plot. Which, again, if the story and characters were good, the stock premise wouldn't be an issue. But they're just not that interesting. The main character, Joshua, really has no character traits, there's nothing interesting about him, and he follows exactly the arc that you expect his character to take. Allison Janney has a part of a US Army colonel, and she's given almost nothing to work with. They try to give her some depth by having her recount the story of how she lost her sons in this war, but then after that, she's just a stereotypical roughneck without an ounce of that vulnerability in her opening scene. Why would you establish a character in this way if you're not actually going to do anything with it? The little AI girl, Alfie, is fine, I guess, but she's just kind of your stereotypical little girl. She's just there to be cute and be Joshua's morality pet. And it genuinely doesn't help that the few scenes that they did include to try to strengthen their bond contain some really, really bad lines of dialogue, including the painfully on-the-nose scene where she tells him that she can't go to heaven because she's not human, and he can't go to heaven because he's not a good person. And there are other problems too. Like, the American Army keeps making brain-dead, idiotic decisions that make you wonder why the AI hasn't already won the war against them. Or that the film's plot feels kind of plodding and feels like characters are just going through the motions. We have to do this thing because that's what the script says we have to do. And there are also a few jarring tonal shifts that completely took me out of the movie. This movie is supposed to be a very serious sci-fi action war drama. Why is there a scene of a dog picking up a bomb and returning it to the robots that just threw it like a game of fetch? That's something straight out of a Looney Tunes cartoon. And believe me, I should know. And this movie utilizes Chekhov's guns so blatantly and without the tiniest bit of interweaving that you can pretty much predict exactly what's going to happen next, even if it manages to be so incredibly forced in order for all of its setups to fully pay off. So like I said, genuinely frustrating. There's a lot to admire about this film, and it definitely has my respect. But it's also really hard to recommend based solely on the fact that its story is just bad. Whether or not you want to experience this film is going to be completely dependent on your taste and how much bland storytelling you're willing to endure. And to be fair, it's not like this film makes jaw-droppingly terrible mistakes. There's nothing quite as embarrassingly awful as Quantumania's MODOK or anything like that. It's mostly stuff we've seen before, and a story that we know precisely what's going to happen. In my personal opinion, I am glad that I saw it, if for no other reason than to just experience this world. But for others, that may not be enough, and I would completely understand it. I know Edward said he doesn't plan on making any other films, as he just wants this to be its own standalone film. And while I definitely respect that, I do hope that maybe this is the start of something. If not another movie, maybe a miniseries, which honestly this probably should have been, or maybe a novel or something. Regardless, I wish Edwards good luck in the future, and keep hoping that he'll make that masterpiece that I know is in him somewhere. But as for this film, I'm going to give the creator, by a razor-thin margin, a half-full shot. It is literally right on the cusp of tipping over to half-empty, but the stuff it does great is honestly too good to ignore. And I guess that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you want to see my early thoughts of any film I watch, or to read more of my reviews, make sure to check out my Letterboxd account. The link to that is in the description below. And make sure that you're subscribed so that you don't miss any upcoming reviews. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.